Good evening. On tonight's show, we will be discussing the issues on social reforms, which is any attempt that seeks to correct any injustices in a society. More specifically, changes in criminal codes. People now want state prisons rather than the various forms of physical punishment. Tonight, we will also be showing how the attitude towards the mentally ill has changed. Finally, there is now a rise in people against the consumption of alcohol. More on that later. Hello everyone, my name is Gavin, and tonight we will be interviewing specialists on criminal codes. He wants changes in the way criminals are punished, and also wants to end the death penalty. Over to interview man on that subject.
Hello Nathan, could you tell us exactly what changes in criminal codes are? Changes in criminal codes are more of a movement to build state prisons or penitentiaries, which grew through the 1820s and 1830s. This allowed more and more states to replace various forms of physical punishment with imprisonment in penitentiaries. Interesting. What are some other changes people wanted? Well, associated with the growth of state prisons was reducing the crimes calling for capital punishment, like the death penalty. People wanted punishments to be performed in private and away from a public crowd. This is how new forms of punishment appeared. What states accepted these changes? In 1835, New York became the first state to stop public executions. And by 1841, the state reduced the death penalty to only 3 crimes: murder, treason, and some forms of arson. In 1846, Michigan was the first state to abolish the death penalty altogether. Soon after, Wisconsin and Rhode Island followed. Oh, that's interesting. How did states find money for new prisons? Actually, states had little money to maintain new prisons, so they had a general goal by the 1800s to make prisons economically self-sufficient by having the inmates produce goods. Very interesting. Can you explain the Auburn and Pennsylvania plan to us? 2 different prison systems arose at first. Most states followed a New York prison model called the Auburn plan. It was named after the Auburn prison opened in 1821 as a maximum security facility. Inmates were locked in separate cells at night, but worked in groups during the day. Pennsylvania had another system in which inmates were placed in solitary confinement, or by themselves with little or no contact with anyone else around the clock. Each cell had running water, a heater, and an individual exercise area. Not only was this type of prison more expensive, but many considered the isolation to be cruel. The Pennsylvania plan did not allow inmates to work or make money for the prison, so the Auburn plan was widely used. Thank you for informing us on that, Nathan. Now back to Gavin at the desk, but before that, Nathan has one more message. The final message is my wave check. Ooh, dang.
Thanks, interview man and Nathan. And now here's some information on the mentally ill. Asylums multiplied throughout Europe and North America in the 1800s, and psychiatry became a recognized medical specialty. They drew on the increasing prestige of science and established themselves as publicly recognized experts on mental illness and its treatment. Here's some information from Dr. Cool, a psychiatrist.
Good evening, everyone. I am pleased to enlighten you on the mentally ill and how conditions improved for them through the asylum movement. The asylum movement was a national reform movement that began in the 1840s in an effort to change the way that people approached the mentally ill and improve the way that the mentally ill were treated. Its purpose was to emphasize treatment and rehabilitation. Before Dorothea Dix came along and sparked the asylum movement, people with mental illnesses were seen as criminals who deserved punishment, not patients who needed treatment. More importantly, the mentally ill were seen as less in comparison to the rest of society. The way that they were treated, lashed into obedience like animals, makes it clear that at one point these people weren't considered human. For a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, This was far from the principles of equality that defined America. In the 1840s, Dorothea Dix fights for better living conditions for the mentally ill. For over 30 years, she lobbies for better care and finally gets the government to fund the building of 32 psychiatric facilities. In 1883, German psychiatrist Emil Kraepelin studies the mental illnesses and begins to draw distinctions between the different disorders. He notes on the differences between manic depressive disorder and schizophrenia, which are still used today. In the early 1900s, using psychiatrical theories, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung treat their patients for mental illnesses. Many of the theories they employed are still discussed today and used as a basis for the study of psychology. Thanks to the effort of Dorothea Dix and other reformers, this movement succeeded in changing the lives of the mentally ill, but it also brought to light the values of our nation and our perceptions of the human individual.
Thanks, Dr. Cool. This just in. We're getting a live interview from Interview Girl. She's getting information on people's views of the temperance movement. Let's send it over.
The temperance movement is a social movement against the consumption of alcoholic beverages. Participants in the movement typically criticize alcohol intoxication or promote complete abstinence from alcohol, and its leaders emphasize alcohol's negative effects on people's healths, personalities, and family lives. Now we are going to be asking a citizen on her views. Oh, am I on TV? Hi, Mom. Hello, miss. Could you tell us your name and why you are against alcohol consumptions? I am Miss Brock, and I'll tell you why. It's because that demon rum causes all of our problems. It's the reason for insanity, poverty, and many of our world's evils. It causes homelessness, high crime rates, and joblessness. Everyone that consumes alcohol is living in immoral matter. God will no longer bless the United States, and these ungodly and unscrupulous people pose a threat to Americans' political system. To survive the American Republic, we need virtuous citizens. Thanks to the Second Great Awakening and the Industrial Revolution, I have been enlightened on the evils of alcohol. How are you and others trying to enforce this end to consumption? I personally belong to the American Temperance Society with 200,000 other people. We publish tracts and hire speakers to depict the negative effects of alcohol upon people. We try to encourage our fellow Americans to reduce the amount of alcohol they consume. Ideally, Americans would forsake alcohol entirely, but we are willing to settle for reduced consumption. Who makes up these temperance movement groups? Most of us temperance advocates are women. Most men believe that we are best suited for home. According to men, a woman's responsibilities is to raise virtuous children. So we use this argument against the men. If women were responsible for raising virtuous children, women should also play a role in helping those people who have become consumed by immoral acts redeem themselves. We march through the towns and stop at every salon and pray for the souls of the barkeepers and their patrons. Us women also demand that the owners sign a pledge to no longer sell alcohol. Is there any opposition to this cause? Yes, of course. There are these American men nowadays who see alcohol as a way to express their Americanism. Some cities even pass laws forbidding our marches because they claim that they cause traffic and they say that we aren't acting in a ladylike manner. But if there's ever an 18th Amendment that outlawed the production and sale of alcohol in the United States, I'm gonna have a party. Thanks for your view on the temperance movement. Now back to Gavin.
Thank you both for that interview. That's all we have for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen. But stay tuned next time for our story on a 7-year-old who took his grandmother's car on a joyride.